Hello my friends, Stark here. Today is the 29th of June 2019. My cousin's 2001 Jeep Grand Cherokee needs a fuel pump. Typically, replacement of the fuel pump would mean lowering the fuel tank, and in this vehicle the tank is at the rear, just ahead of the rear bumper. In my particular circumstance, however, I have recently replaced the fuel pumps of both a Chevrolet Trailblazer and a Ford Ranger, and I simply didn't want to get into dropping yet another fuel tank. And so, with my cousin's permission, I have carefully cut an access hole into the floor of the spare wheel well, right over the fuel pump location. And so the purpose of this video, should you choose to follow this method, is to show you where to cut your access hole for a second generation 1999 to 2005 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Ideally, I should have cut my access hole just a little further forward, perhaps 3/4 of an inch. The entire hole shifted 3/4 of an inch forward. Nevertheless, it didn't impede the removal of the old pump whatsoever. So I'm lingering on the spare wheel well here because I want you to get an excellent idea of where to cut that access hole. So should you do this, should you take the shortcut and cut yourself an access port to the fuel pump? Well, you're a big boy, and it's not my place to tell you what to do, and certainly not my place to tell you what not to do. But if you take the shortcut, then keep the following 4 caveats in mind. Number 1, you accept responsibility. You understand that it is entirely your decision whether the reward is worth the risk. Number 2, only do it if the problem is a defunct fuel pump. Don't even think about it if the problem is a gasoline leak. Number 3, if you must trim or grind the access port hole, then for goodness sake do that before you disconnect the hoses and remove the fuel pump. Sparks and gasoline fumes don't mix. And number 4, you need to be confident in your skills with the angle grinder. Now, for much of this, there's a decent amount of vertical space between the spare wheel well floor and the fuel pump. But back here on the rear edge, there's only about a 1/4 inch. So you need to be circumspect, you need to be careful. And if you don't have the skill with the angle grinder, then either don't do this or keep practicing. Get yourself some sheet metal. Practice cutting with the angle grinder. Learn that feel. Learn how it feels when the cutting wheel just slices through the metal, just goes as far as you need to, but no further. If we take the shortcut, then we have a problem to contend with that wouldn't be on our radar had we lowered the fuel tank. And that is the exceptional length of the wire cluster leading to the electrical connector. This, of course, plugs into the vehicle's wiring harness. Typically, on an in-tank fuel pump, you may have 6 or 8 inches of wire. And in fact, in many of them, the electrical connector is mounted at the top of the pump head. So this is really quite long, and the reason for the length is that this plugs into the vehicle's wiring harness not at the top of the fuel tank, but at the front face of the fuel tank, meaning that you can actually see the electrical connector and the path of the wires from underneath the vehicle. Very unusual. That means, however, that with the fuel tank still in place, we need to route this electrical connector and the wiring leading to it across the top of the tank and down the front face of the tank to the mating connector, the vehicle's wiring harness. The plan is to pull the new wire cluster across the top of the fuel tank and down the leading face. I've already cut the old wire cluster from the top of the old fuel pump, but I've left this wire cluster in place. That's important. Don't pull it out, just leave it here dangling. Alright, so our pull wire is now attached. So there's our old electrical connector. Let's start pulling this through. Okay. And here comes the pull wire. Okay. Got my wire now. Come on, baby, come on. Come on. Come on. Here she comes, here she comes. Oh, yes. Okay. All right, and there's the new connector. And you can see the two pylons on the electrical connector, and they snap into a pair of holes on a triangulation bracket that connects the fuel tank shield to the unibody frame of the vehicle. Showtime, baby. Time to shine. All right, rock and roll. Damn things locked me out. That's okay, the hatch is open. All right, let's polish off the video. And here's my sheet steel fuel pump cover. It does a reasonable job of covering the access hole. This particular sheet steel plate came from a defunct kerosene heater, hence the general shape and the curves. I have it held into place in 3 locations. The 2 outer screws had plenty of clearance between the screw tip and the plastic fuel tank, but the center screw was a little close, and so I gained the extra clearance by placing a washer under the screw head. Well, yes, it could have been better executed, but this is what I had available, and I think it's sufficient for the application. I should add that while under the vehicle working on the fuel pump wiring, I noticed that the rear axle oil was leaking into the rear left brakes, and so that turned out to be a much bigger job than the fuel pump. Removing the axle shaft from the axle tube, cutting away the retainer and the bearing, new seal, pressing on new bearing and retainer, cleaning up the brake assembly. But that's been covered on YouTube elsewhere, so I didn't record it. Alright, cuz, take it for a test drive, let me know how it goes. Well, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Take care. See you next time.